But while advancing technology will cost jobs, can it also create new jobs? And what about the small guys? The low-tech guys? Can they evolve and thrive in the new job arena? We'll find out today on Future Forward. Have you ever wondered what the future will be like? What life will be like? Have you wondered what the next big idea will be? The new way forward? It's time to ask questions about our future. Explore new ideas. Seek out fresh insights. Consider different perspectives. I'm Asha Gill. Join me on Future Forward as I discover what matters in this world of ours. By 2030, the global labor force will reach about 3.5 billion. That is half the world's population today. And whilst we may be facing a labor crunch in Singapore today, if 2 billion jobs were to disappear in the future, what does it mean for us? I'm here on the Circle Line of the Singapore Mass Rapid Transit. It's been operational since 2009 and was designed and built to be fully automated. Looking ahead, we've got downtown, Thomson and the East Coast Line, which will be driverless as well. But even before the Circle Line, the North East Line was already fully automated, as was the light rail transit before that. But while there doesn't seem to have been any concern over this shift towards a driverless rail commute, there are worries that the second machine age may be upon us. Which begs the question, what other jobs are likely to disappear besides the train drivers? I put the question to the president of the Singapore Management University, Professor Arnaud de Meyer. What are we looking to lose for sure now in the next 10 years, job-wise?
The jobs where you do knowledge processing in a relatively standardized way, for example, accountants, those jobs are going to disappear. Telemarketing will probably be displaced by machines. Help desks with standardized questions about how do I use my mobile phone or how do I use my computer. These help desks are jobs that actually don't require a lot of thinking. It just requires you to listen to the question, processing the information, and you come up with a standardized answer. Making a diagnosis for a medical doctor on the basis of simple symptoms. Computers are probably better at doing that than medical doctors. So the jobs that are about processing standardized information to come up with a standardized answer, those jobs are going to disappear.
So from accountants to doctors, telemarketers and help desk operators, white collar to blue collar, it is a wide range of jobs that will give way to computerization and automation. And the second machine age will bring more robots into our world. For example, here at the All Saints Home, paraseals have been tasked to provide interaction and stimulation for the elderly. A quick check online and I found out that staff in a nursing home in Stuttgart, Germany have a pair of robot helpers. A hotel in California has Alo, its robotic butler. And just recently, the Miraikan Museum in Japan has hired Otanaroid to be a robot science communicator. She and her android sister, Kodomoroid, have been hard at work since June. So, should we start worrying? Will robots take over our world?
We had this vague idea that robots were going to take over the world and drive us out, but actually what you see today much more is cobotization, not robotization, but cobotization. Right. Collaborative robots. That's what's happening actually in industry today. That is that you get that interaction between people and robots on the factory floor, whereby robots will do the repetitive, simple tasks, and where the more sophisticated tasks will be done by people. That interaction between robots and people is going to be much higher in the future than it is today. But in the end, still judgments have to be made, and for those judgments, I'm still confident that we will need people. So you can be reassured, robots are not going to take over the world.
When futurist Thomas Frey spoke at Creative Innovation 2 years ago, he predicted that 2 billion jobs would disappear by 2030. But it does not mean the end of it all.
When I talk about 2 billion jobs going away, this doesn't mean that 2 billion people get unemployed. It means that our jobs are transitioning, and we're transitioning them at a faster pace than ever before in history.
Transitioning. Indeed, throughout history, jobs have disappeared and new jobs taken their place. In the last 20 years or so alone, when the internet took off, we've seen so much of that happening. And now we've got the Internet of Things that will only speed things up.
Yes, we move towards a world of Internet of Things, where things talk to each other and share data with each other. But that, for me, is a great opportunity because it creates an infrastructure on which we can build new businesses, new business models. I keep on telling my students that 50% of the jobs that exist today didn't exist 10 years ago.
Really? 10 years ago, 50?
From 10 years from now, probably 50% of the jobs then, we can't imagine what they are today. Can you remember the time when you took your first selfie? It's probably less than 3 years ago. That has created a whole business because these selfies go onto websites. There are all kinds of service functions around it. Think about the businesses that are created only in the last 3-4 years around a simple phenomenon like taking a picture of yourself. That is going to happen over the coming 10 years, day after day, and people will build new business models on the basis of this infrastructure that the Internet of Things will create.
So with all the changes, what will some of the new jobs be? I met with Charlie Ang, founder of Futurecraft, a professional development company based in Singapore. For Charlie, future jobs are neither blue nor white collar, but pink.
Many of these jobs are in the so-called pink-collar type of professions. The caregivers, the teachers, the healthcare professionals, the personal services. So it's a matter of those jobs being displaced and the people holding these jobs to look for new kind of job opportunities through picking up new skills, a new mindset, and going into areas that they have not traditionally looked at before.
According to Charlie, the future of Singapore's job landscape will look like this. Innovation will be the new competitive advantage. Those who can innovate and constantly come up with new products, ideas and solutions will survive the ever-changing job landscape of the future. But that's Singapore. What does the job landscape look like for some other countries? In the US, the IT sector will be huge, with app and software developers on the wanted list. And the healthcare sector will also be where the hot-ticket professions, such as nurses and health service managers, are. Across the Atlantic, in Ireland, IT positions like ethical hackers and software developers will be in demand, as will jobs in the food industry like food scientists. And more priests will be needed to tend to their flock. Over in China, with a labor force reaching a whopping 861 million by 2030, knowledge-based jobs will be sought after. Job seekers will converge on sectors like high-tech manufacturing, biotechnology, and education. There seems to be no doubt that the future of jobs lies in adapting to the technological advances. So the question is, what do we need to do to keep up with the changes? That's up next. With the internet connected computers, the Internet of Things will connect everything else. It's been estimated that 50 billion devices that don't exist or aren't connected yet will be by 2020. All that connectivity could mean better healthcare, better education, better public safety and security. Or maybe simply a better parking experience. With the Internet of Things, designated lots won't be taken up by those not entitled to them.
This car is in blacklist 2560. Please check it.
And you will never lose your car again. But while all that seems great, what does it mean for jobs? I find out from the president of Asia Pacific and Japan for Cisco, Irving Tan.
When you connect the 50 billion of devices that we anticipate by the year 2020 to the internet, right, that creates a lot more ability to manage traffic, for example, much more effectively, to provide public safety and security much more effectively as well. Now, you may also wonder, what if I was a humble security guard? Right? What would happen to me? Well, I think there will still be a need for public safety and security, but the nature of the work will change. Where in the past you may be short of manpower to get a security guard to patrol the perimeter of a campus, for example. Through the use of the Internet of Things, you're much better able to manage the perimeter and the security of a campus. And only when there is a particular intrusion, then do you deploy the guard. So the guard will still be needed. It's just that we're being able to use that individual and that asset much more effectively to respond both in a reactive and also proactive manner.
So the Internet of Things is expected to transform some existing jobs. Great for those who are able to adapt, but how easy will that be?
This is where I think you can see a lot of advancements being made through the Internet of Things as well, to make the usage of the Internet and the Internet of Things very simple, very intuitive, such that your 7-year-old child or your grandmother would be able to use it. And through making it very intuitive, to slowly inculcating it into the fabric of how they operate their lives, and through that human connection, I think it's quite easy and people don't really have to be scared in terms of embracing what the Internet of Things is going to be able to deliver.
Well, the internet is intuitive. I've never had to use it to carve out a new career for myself. I'm not sure I'd know how to, and I'm sure the same goes for some others too. So, what do we need to know in order to take full advantage of it?
The old way is really teaching you what to think, whereas the new way is really teaching you how to think, so that you're equipped with this lifetime skill set that no matter how the world changes, you're able to adapt and make an informed decision.
So, the key skill is no longer about gaining knowledge, but knowing how to process the information. And this means schools and the way teachers go about teaching will have to change.
The younger people that we get now into our classrooms don't come anymore to listen to the sage on stage. That was the past formula of professor, right? You go and stand on the stage and you show your knowledge. Today, when we go into a classroom as professors, we know that we may know more than the students, but they can verify everything on internet immediately. And if needed, they actually can find additional information on internet that maybe we as professors don't have necessarily readily available in our mind. We're now much more in a relationship where we as faculty need to help students to make distinction between good and bad information, good and bad knowledge, reliable and non-reliable knowledge. As a faculty member, we need to help our students to structure information that they can find anywhere on internet if necessary. And we also need to provide them the experiences in which they can use that knowledge. So you will see universities evolving much more towards experience-based, project-based learning, where students apply the knowledge that they can actually get from somewhere else.
And for Arno, learning does not stop once you leave the classroom.
We need to find a way of continuous education, continuing learning, because the world changes around us. Now, I would always give somebody who is more mature the advice not to stop working and then go for a course, but actually combine a course with the experience of working, and because so that you can apply immediately what you learn at school or at university or at another provider of education, that what you learn there you can immediately test out, apply, experiment with it, and bring the result of that experimentation back into the classroom and say, hey prof, it didn't work what you said.
That was rubbish.
It was not right. But maybe if we do it this way, it will work.
Continuous learning is not a new concept, but certainly the pace of change seems to have gotten a lot faster. And workers have to be so much more nimble in finding a career path that might span over several different jobs.
If we look at the new age employee or individual, each one of them really need to be entrepreneurial, because in a very fast-moving world, there's very few constants and very few sacred cows, and they really need to invent their careers over and over and over again. So they operate like a business of one, or a very small business, even though they may be a free agent, but they're doing their own marketing, they're doing their own sales, they're doing their own consultancy, and thankfully there are technologies that support that. and enable them to be discovered over the internet.
Well, it looks like in the future, micro-entrepreneurs, or free agents as Charlie calls them, will come into their own. But is that really possible when only a handful of large companies will be dominating future markets? Answers after the break. We've been talking about the future job landscape. In a world where only a handful of large companies are dominating the markets, will there be any room for smaller players? According to some, the answer is yes.
I do see more of a bimodal world, whereby on the one hand you will have a limited number of very large companies that provide products, food, airplanes or whatever. I mean, look at those industries. Most of them have 3, 4, 5 companies that really dominate the market. And then I see a market, another mode, so it's a bimodal situation whereby you will have the smaller workshop on the corner of the street, where we can use our creativity, where computer-aided design will help us to perhaps design your particular chair that you want to have, the particular table that you want to have, and we'll be able to produce it probably with 3D printing. Of course, you can imagine very well for fashion, for clothes, that you say, rather than buying my T-shirt in one of these large retail stores, that I go to the corner of the street and I say, actually, I want a T-shirt that looks like this, with that sign on it, with that picture on it, and I have it made in a few minutes there in front of me with 3D printing and whatever. The possibilities there are without limit, I would say.
And in some ways, those possibilities have already started to become realities. The General Company, or TGC, provides a platform to new designers and emerging artisan craftsmen. Not every one of them is near a 3D printer, but they are carving out this new path.
In the past, people just buy goods for the brand or because they like it, for the price point. I think consumers nowadays are a little different. They don't just buy a good because they think it's cool or it's beautiful. They read a little bit more to the background, to the details of it. Like I said, they enjoy knowing the process of how it's made. They don't need to make it, but it's just interesting because these are processes that you never knew existed. And it helps them in the ownership process to know that it takes a certain amount of time and effort into making a product. It makes them a happier buyer, actually.
According to Colin, the artisanal process, which cannot be replicated by automation, is what makes him and his fellow designers stand out. Still, as unique as their pieces may be, how do they compete against the big brands?
The idea of our company comes in as a representation. We consolidate skill sets from individual makers. Every one maker has their unique skill set. We actually pitch the skill sets to corporate clients that we know, brands that we work with, or even ourselves. We try to commission special projects with these individual makers. And they can't possibly scale up too fast as well. And in a weird way, a lot of their resources are committed to things like logistics, distribution, deliveries, invoicing, which kind of takes their time away from the true thing that they are good at, which is the making and the crafting. We will start to come in and help them as supporting functions in this kind of roles so they can continue to focus on what they're good at the brand, coming with new products, innovating their techniques, and also a little bit more production.
So TGC acts as an agent, a client, as well as back-end support for these designers. And as low-tech as their products may be, technology is not entirely missing in the mix. The TGC online retail portal markets all the brands to a global audience. So without becoming a large company, without becoming high-tech, these individual micro-entrepreneurs are innovatively making it work. As appealing as the artisanal approach may be, the possibility of jobs does seem promising. But on the flip side, what should we be concerned about?
For me, one of the big challenges is that we're living in a global world, and that when we destroy jobs and at the same time create jobs, that is not necessarily in the same place. To give you a very concrete example, about 20 years ago, when you would have talked about the telecommunication industry, everything was done in Europe. The Nokias, the Alcatels of the world, they were all in Europe. Today, when you talk about telecommunication, you talk more about United States with Qualcomm, or you talk about Huawei and a number of other, or Samsung, of companies here in Asia. You see that with technological evolution, we destroy jobs. At the same time, we create a lot of jobs. But the location where these jobs are created is not the same anymore. And that is something that many of us, whether we are in the government or whether we are in business, have really to think hard about. That is that we must make sure that when we create new jobs, that we create them for our own people where we are. The second biggest challenge is that there is a risk of the haves and the have-nots. That is, the people that can do the upskilling, that are able to learn new things, have the opportunities to learn, and some of the people that somehow miss the boat, miss a generation of technology and are left behind. And so there is this risk of a divide in the society, and that's where I think there is a need for governments, in my opinion, again, together with business and NGOs, it is a tri-sector collaboration that we need here, but there is a need for governments to ensure an upscaling that actually is done with the large majority of the population.
Certainly, as a society, we'll need to be mindful that no one gets left behind. But as scary as this fast-paced world may seem, the possibilities are there for us to take hold of.
From education to healthcare to personal services to retail. And that is where the opportunities is for the entrepreneurs and even professionals who decided to leave their jobs to do something new, to utilize these technologies and reimagine and reinvent new ways of customer delivery, customer service, running their operations.
And what the Internet of Things will really do is to transform business models and through that create different kind of job opportunities related to things as I mentioned around business analytics, big data, creating solutions around automation, and will basically transform the way we do things going forward.
50% of the jobs that will exist in 10 years from now don't exist today. That's a great opportunity. But it's probably an opportunity that you can only grasp when you prepare yourself for it.
Whilst there's no crystal ball to give us specifics, as we've heard today, adaptation is really the key.